Welcome, and thanks for joining us for our Workday Chats today. I'm Carrie Barakier, President of the Workday Foundation and Vice President, Global Impact and Employee Life at Workday. I'll be your host for today. If you have any questions, please share them in the comments below. I'm joined today by Gayatri Agnew, Senior Director of Opportunity at Walmart.org, Ebony Beckwith, Chief Philanthropy Officer at Salesforce, Lisa Countryman-Quiros, CEO of JVS, and Maria Flynn, President and CEO, Jobs for the Future. And I know we all look forward to hearing from them shortly. But first, to set the stage for our discussion, we're living through a really turbulent time. We're witnessing a global health pandemic that continues to persist. And recent events of racial violence and the ongoing protests that followed have brought a long overdue conversation about racism, equity, and opportunity to the forefront of our daily lives. In addition, millions of people across the globe have lost their jobs as a result of COVID-19, which has disproportionately impacted communities of color. Many of these newly unemployed, as well as frontline workers seeking new career opportunities, are extremely capable, motivated, and talented, but they haven't had the opportunity to find that open door to the corporate world. With workforce development top of mind for all of us, I'm looking forward to discussing the rapidly changing work environment and learning from all of you about how you're helping those who experience barriers to employment in the midst of the economic, social, and racial upheaval that we're facing today. I want to start off with some sobering numbers and statistics that I know we're all familiar with, but I think these numbers can really help set the stage for our audience. While the unemployment rate fell to 11.1% in June and is down from the peak of 14.7% in April, these numbers are still very high, and we know these numbers will continue to fluctuate as states adjust reopening phases based on the spread of the virus. Among minorities, the unemployment rate for Black workers was as high as 19.8% and as high as 20.4% for Hispanic workers, compared to a rate of 13.5% for white workers. Black and Latinx families are more likely to work in the service industries that were the first to be hit by layoffs and less likely to work in white-collar jobs that can be done safely from home. They have, on average, significantly less in savings to help them weather a period of unemployment. While we've begun to see a temporary decrease in the unemployment rate due to the economy partially reopening last month, unemployment rates continue to most severely impact minorities and women. So to start, as we continue to think about new ways of working, including remote work and to reorient to the new normal, how are your organizations pivoting and adjusting your work to better serve populations hit hardest by COVID-19? Let's start with Lisa at JVS.
Thank you, Carrie. Again, I'm Lisa Countryman-Quiros. I'm the CEO of JVS. JVS is a long-standing workforce development organization serving the whole Bay Area community. We've been around since 1973, and we specialize in partnering with employers to create pathways to high-quality jobs for all of our community members, particularly with a focus on those who don't have a four-year degree, and particularly communities of color. So this has been an incredibly challenging time for all of us, it goes without saying, and this has affected us in so many ways. First of all, our workforce is not accustomed to working from home. We provide human services. We are accustomed to providing direct services in our office, helping people with whatever it is that they need. And so that was a really big cultural pivot for us. My husband works for a tech company. It was very easy for him to just work from home. And for all of our team members, that was not the case. We really had to prep them for that. But we made that transition really quickly within about a week. And within a matter of really a few days, we transitioned all of our programming to remote delivery. And so that includes all of our Pathways programs, all of our youth programs, our job search programs. But at the same time, we knew that we were not then elevating our capacity to serve more people. We were simply transitioning that program, all of those programs, to serve people that we were already serving remotely. And so that became a huge priority for me, to make sure that we were finding ways to connect with people who were really struggling and recently laid off. And we did that by launching over 25 new workshops, training opportunities, rapid hiring events, which we rolled out over a series of 3 months. We had about 1,500 unique registrants to those programs, and it was really critical not only that we provide those opportunities for people to get connected to services and all of the supports we could provide, but that we were really learning from those opportunities and assessing the value of those programs, and making sure that we were checking in with our clients. And we got about 4.5 out of 5 in our satisfaction scores, so we were super excited about that. That big pivot was really the first thing that we did. There were 2 more pillars to that work, and that included really understanding what our clients need. So we launched a very robust client needs assessment, which we ran March 20th, and then again May 20th, and we'll keep rerunning it. And we learned some really critical information from that, like in terms of the depth of need that people have. Very sobering. And then lastly, we launched an emergency fundraising campaign, and we were very successful. We exceeded our goal of $1 million, and we raised $1,027,000 and change, which we're really excited about. And we needed that to be able to meet the needs that we saw in the client needs survey. So to be able to provide cash supports to our clients, to buy laptops for our clients so that they could participate in remote training, and then the creation of totally new programming, some of which has already been kicked off and some of which is coming.
Wow, that's awesome. Congrats on the fundraising.
Thank you.
Gayatri, what about you guys over at Walmart?
Sure. Thank you, Carrie, and thanks for having me with you today. So as was mentioned, Gayatri Agnew, and I'm with Walmart.org, which is the social impact arm of our company. So I oversee aspects of our philanthropy and aspects of how we partner across the business to really drive shared value in how we approach our work. And I was set back a little bit by like the statistics you introduced in the intro there, all of which I do know. It's a little different to hear them all back to back. And so, I think first it just warrants pausing to say that this moment, for so many reasons, is unlike any other moment we have ever collectively faced before. And so, there are ways in which my company has uniquely responded, but then I am one of 1.4 million US workers in the United States, and every single one of those responses and experiences becomes individualized to who we are as people, right? I have 2 tiny kids who are running around here as I'm trying to do my work. And then we have our associates who are working in store. Our stores haven't closed. And in fact, we are in a unique position as a business because we saw the opposite thing that many businesses have seen through this crisis, which is we actually saw a spike in demand. And so we've had to both rise to meet the needs of consumers here in the US and around the world, but in particular in our US market, we did 2 things. One is that we actually implemented a quite rapid shift in how we hire to reduce our time to hire significantly so that we could actually hire someone the same day that they applied to come and work for Walmart, allowing them to minimize the time they're going without employment. So in the last, I guess, since COVID started in first week of March, Walmart's actually brought on 300,000 additional workers. Some of this is as a result of our own associates who are out, who aren't able to work. All the reasons, but also the massive rise in demand. And we're trying to meet that and trying to meet our consumers' needs. We've also seen a huge uptake in, of course, our online grocery pickup and, just a need to increase our cleaning and maintenance in stores. All of these things have shifted the workplace. So it's shifted my workplace as a corporate employee. I'm here in my home. It's shifted our associates in stores and field and distribution center because every aspect of their day-to-day is also different. Right. And then I think, as you mentioned in your intro, Carrie, this moment has also just shed light on a lot of aspects of the American economy that were deeply inequitable prior to COVID. But the combination of COVID and the focus on race and racial inequality in America has has just like brought these to life in ways that were not untrue before, but I think we are all seeing and accepting and internalizing and hopefully beginning to address in new and creative ways.
Yeah, great, thank you. I love the idea of the rapid hiring, and hopefully it's a practice that'll continue long after the pandemic ends. Maria, what about you guys over at Jobs for the Future?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's great to be here, great to be with everyone. So as Carrie said, I'm Maria Flynn. I'm the president and CEO of Jobs for the Future. So we are a national nonprofit organization that works for really driving transformation in the nation's education and workforce systems. And so that's something that has been at the heart of our mission since we were founded back in 1983. And so I think, these past 4 months has just, made us realize just how critical our mission is at this moment, and has really been a time for us to lean into that mission in some new and exciting ways. And really, I just want to echo what Gayatri just said, how COVID has brought into sharp relief these existing societal and economic disparities. And these are things that at JFF we've been working to tackle for over 35 years, and it's core to us. But I think it's just important for folks to understand that, these systems were broken long before the pandemic hit. And now we are just kind of seeing, like in an overdue manner, right, the effects and how those effects are magnified, and the critical piece of equity and racial equity as part of these conversations. A conference that we had a few weeks ago that many of you were involved in, Horizons, we had Andrew Yang speak, and he made the point that we saw as a nation 10 years of change in 10 weeks. That statement has really stuck with me. And I think what's important is that even though, this has been just, as Gayatri said, a time that's just truly unprecedented for us and has been devastating for so many million Americans and their families, how can we kind of, as the education and workforce field more broadly, really see this as a time of opportunity, and how can we see this as a time to push for the type of policy change that we've been looking for so long. I feel as a field, a lot of times we're playing defense, right? We're trying to make sure programs don't get cut or funding doesn't get, reduced, but how can we really turn that into playing a bit of offense in this moment and really pushing aggressively for some big changes? And so I just want to mention our policy framework that we put out a couple weeks ago for that really focuses on equitable economic recovery and puts out a framework for policies to really be looking at, how do we recover from this recession in a much better way than we recovered, in a more equitable way than we recovered from the 2008 recession. So I guess, really just seeing how can we collaborate and partner and respond in some new and different ways.
Great. And I do want to tap into that a bit more later on in the conversation. But Ebony, how are things different for you at Salesforce when, your workforce could really work in a virtual environment probably before the pandemic hit? How have things changed for you guys?
I have to start by saying, first of all, thank you, Carrie, for having me on here today. And, I was really inspired and continue to be really inspired by the way our employees have rallied together to not only support each other, but to support our communities during this crisis. It was easy for us to pivot as a workforce to work from home. It's part of who we are, what we do. It was very simple for us. But because this was an unprecedented moment, we had to think and really think creatively and take a flexible approach to some of our giving back programs. So we've innovated some of our programs and our policies to allow our employees to be more flexible in supporting the communities in the way that they need it the most. And I'll give you one example of this is we had to shift all of our volunteering to virtual volunteering. Volunteering is so core to who we are as a company. So when COVID-19 hit, we knew we had to come up with a solution to keep it going because our employees were asking about it. We knew that our partners needed us now more than ever. So we wanted to figure out how to address that really easily. So within a few days, we launched an online internal resource to help our employees find those virtual volunteering opportunities. And now I hear about employees giving time to activities like virtual mentoring, research projects, hot mapping, which is something that I really like to do. And that was really nice. And we also knew that we wanted to continue some of the events that have been so valuable for young people and adults in our communities and reimagine them for a virtual audience. One great example of this is Workforce Week, which is a program founded by Workday that equips young people or people facing barriers to employment with the skills, the training, and connections they need to gain meaningful employment. And we partnered with Workday, DocuSign, LinkedIn, Okta, some others I'm sure that I'm leaving out, and several nonprofit partners to host online workshops really focused on learning about new career pathways and gaining those in-demand skills and expanding professional networks. And the outcomes just really blew me away, as I'm sure they did for you too, Carrie. The event attracted nearly 400 job seekers from underserved communities in the Bay Area, and Salesforce had over 130 volunteers alone. So I think it's really important in this new post-pandemic normal, whatever that is that we don't let this crisis cause anyone to fall through the cracks. And we all have to do everything we can in our power to make sure that everyone has equal access to opportunity.
Yeah, I was also really thrilled to see the participation rates of employees during Workforce Week and seeing these job seekers building social capital in times where employers might not be hiring immediately, but when they start to hire again, these folks now have a way to connect more quickly and easily with hiring managers, which is just awesome. So all of us share a belief that businesses and business leaders play an integral role in using our unique platforms to help create the change we want to see. So what are each of your organizations doing to help rebuild a better and more equitable employment ecosystem that provides better access for opportunity for all? I know we play different roles, whether we're actually the company doing the hiring or the training organization or the organization focused more on national policy and ecosystem building, but I'd love to hear from you guys. Gayatri, maybe we'll start with you.
Sure.
What are you guys doing to sort of build it back better?
Yeah, I love that. And I think that framing and that phrase is so important, as we think about these moments of uncertainty, which can feel very scary. And I think a couple of folks said, right, also create an opportunity for us to shape something new and something different. And so I think at Walmart, I mentioned shared value, but I want to kind of dig in on what this means for us, because this is the core of how we've demonstrated our response and really do want to double down on supporting our associates, but also supporting the broader retail sector at large, which is really struggling right now. And so this idea of shared value is that you can, it's actually as old as our company is. So, Sam Walton's original reason for creating the company was to make sure that people in rural communities had access to the same goods at the same cost, at the same price that folks in more urban environments were able to access goods. And so he started building Walmarts, and we all know the next 50 years of history. And so that idea that irrespective of sort of where you come from, you should have this equal access to opportunity has always been so core to what our company has been about. And that's no different today as we think about access to work and employment and access to mobility within that work and employment. And so we use a framework where we think about economic mobility and economic opportunity in the context of access, stability, and mobility. So access to work, which is really where the height of the crisis is right now, right? 40 million people suddenly becoming displaced from work and disconnected from work is a huge crisis. But as folks begin to reconnect to work and different kinds of work, they need to be able to stabilize in that work, which means they need to have benefit structures and wages and schedules that accommodate them in their lives. And then finally, this idea of mobility. How do we build in structures of mobility both through our philanthropy and our external investments and within our own practices in the company? So, one, I think, important example that Walmart's doing, we just in a couple weeks ago launched an expansion of a program that we call Live Better You, which is the ability of our associates to pursue further education for $1 a day. And so it's a suite of different offerings through a partner, Guild Education. We have dozens and dozens of different options. Many are college completion programs, but what we actually launched a couple weeks ago is a virtual skills trades experience. And so you can work at Walmart, you can work in our stores, and you can engage for $1 a day in a cohort program that allows you to become a plumber or to become an HVAC operator. And these are high paying, high demand jobs, even in today's economy, right? People are still needing their AC fixed. People are still needing plumbing services, even in an era of COVID. And so we're really thinking not just about how do we support the human capital development of our associates, but how do we do it in a way that builds stronger communities in the places where we serve? And how do we do it in a way that allows our associates to gain access to employment skills that, well, are not, I don't think any skill is fully future proof. I think this idea that there are jobs, and it's everything from coding all the way to plumbing, right? And everything in between, there are certain high demand skills. And if we can orient our upskilling and training programs to align to these high demand, higher wage skills, we can really move people up. And so that's been one of the ways that Walmart has really doubled down on supporting our associates, their development and their economic mobility.
That's awesome. I know that we've talked about this a lot, Gayatri. I'm such a big admirer of Walmart's commitment to career progression inside and outside of the walls of
Absolutely.
It's really cool. So Ebony, maybe I could turn to you for a minute. You guys are trailblazers, as we know. Maybe you could talk a little bit as we think about building it back better. What investments are you guys making in that area?
I'm absolutely stealing the build back better. I'm taking notes during this. I've already gotten a few good ones. So I think a couple of things that are really going to move the needle. So earlier this year, we made the decision to expand the role of our Chief Equality Officer to also oversee recruiting and have the two offices of equality and recruiting sit together as part of an HR organization. And the goal here is really just to ensure that every decision we make, from who we hire to how we promote and how we retain people, is done through a lens of equity. And we also brought on recruiters who specialize in sourcing and hiring people from diverse backgrounds. And more broadly, we want to empower our partners and communities to set up this next generation for success. Our partnerships with nonprofit partners like JFF, like JVS, really help connect us with extraordinary untapped talent. To date, we've invested over $25 million in workforce development programs, and really excited about that. And one other thing we just recently announced is the Salesforce Talent Alliance, which is an initiative to help partners in the Salesforce ecosystem build a more diverse workforce. Companies start by taking a pledge to commit to inclusive hiring practices, such as removing biases from job descriptions and ensuring a fair and equitable hiring process. Go figure. Then our team connects with them. They connect them to trained Salesforce candidates from underrepresented groups in tech. And our hope is that companies will really devote 20% of their annual hiring to net new Salesforce trained professionals. And these are candidates with less than 6 months of experience. We want them to have an incredible opportunity for that first rung on the ladder that's needed for them to begin their career journey. So it's a many-pronged approach for us, and we're hoping that these are just a few of the ways that we'll start to addressing equitable employment.
Okay. Before I take credit for Build It Back Better, I do want to give a shout out to an organization called Nation Swell, who's working on a collaborative effort called Build It Back Better.
Love it.
All right. So let's turn it over to you, Lisa. When you think about how we're going to make changes for the future as we build it back, what is JVS doing in this space?
Great, thank you. So we are both looking internally and externally. We recently hired and Ebony, you made me think of this. We recently hired a new director of HR and talent. We really recrafted that position to align our DEI strategy with our talent mapping and talent development plan. So that is absolutely internally a priority for us to continue to increase diversity and support advancement, just like we want to see advancement for all of our clients. Externally, in terms of our client impact outcomes, we are really extending our success horizon because we want to make sure that we are supporting not just helping people get a job, but really supporting economic mobility for people. So we're looking at, not just a quick placement, but really a 2-year success horizon so that we can help people get that first job, the second job, and the career job. And that means a different level of engagement with our clients and thinking differently about how we deliver programs. So I think we are on the cusp of really exciting innovations this year when we think about program delivery, our ability to assess and evaluate our programs in a more modularized way. And all of that will support our ability to scale and deliver programs to a much broader audience. I think that has been one of the most exciting things about this very challenging, incredibly challenging time, is that it has just accelerated innovation in a really significant way. So really setting our sights not just on a job, not just on a threshold wage, which have been driving kind of KPIs for us over the last 5 years, but thinking about a combination of economic mobility and driving racial equity across all of our programs.
Great. Thank you. And Maria, what about JFF? I know you've got a Recover Stronger pledge and Impact Employers. Can you talk a little bit about what you guys are doing?
Absolutely. So, as part of our mission to provide access to economic opportunity for all, we really focus on designing and scaling program and policy solutions that really drive change. And then we also really work to utilize our platform as a national intermediary to bring together kind of, coalitions of the willing and really to drive action. And so, Carrie, as you mentioned, we have been using our corporate action platform and our impact employer framework to really be a coalescing kind of movement during this time. And coming out of that, just a few weeks ago, we announced the Recover Stronger campaign. And Salesforce and Walmart and Workday are all part of our founding coalition for that, which is really awesome, along with Microsoft and Postmates and many more coming on board. I think it's a great example of when we can get such, phenomenal leading voices singing in unison is extremely powerful, and I think is motivating them, for others to join forces and get on board as well. And so part of Recover Stronger is really helping to get corporations to embrace internal workforce policies that increase career opportunity and mobility for their employees. So really critical. Also, ensuring that equity and racial justice being front and center in talent practices is another unifying theme in that work. And really, it's just in the examples we've heard here just now from Ebony and Gayatri, really showing that companies are not just putting out great statements, but that are backing up those statements with action and investments. And last couple weeks ago, Microsoft came out with their announcement about huge investment in retraining as well. So just lots of great examples, and at JFF, just really proud to be able to help to be a convener and a driver of this work and an amplifier across the field.
Yeah, and I know that we've all had conversations individually about the fact that we're now going to have these 40 million individuals that are going to be competing for jobs against folks that might have, a 4-year college degree from a top-tier university and 5 years work experience in the field. And we need to make sure that we're making room for people that have potential to succeed and thrive regardless of background. And I think that all of you are doing great work in that area, but it's critically important that as we think about building it back better, that we're removing the barriers for people that are going to need access to opportunity.
Well, and Carrie, just building on that point that you make, in a lot of the conversations we start talking about folks and backgrounds and how we hire, and we sort of bifurcate who we hire and how we hire by normal hires, meaning college educated, and other hires. And, Walmart has never in the history of our company required a college degree to be a store manager, in which you earn a 6-figure job and manage not a small business, a fairly large business, on average 300 employees and, above $100 million business. And we don't entrust our store managers to do that because of the college degree that they have. We entrust our store managers to do that because of the talent that they have as humans, irrespective of whether they went to college or not. And so, I think one of the key ingredients to building a more equitable recovery is recognizing that, human potential is incredible and people have tremendous capacity to perform in companies like those that we all represent, but are not always given a fair shot to access those jobs. And so, we've worked with you guys and with others on really scaling alternative routes and really thinking about how an individual can show the skills that they have irrespective of how they earned those skills. But I do think it's so important to recognize, especially as we think about diversity in the workplace, that in a lot of cases, folks that have that divergent or diverse background bring perspective and context to the company that we may lack without, right? And so as we think about merchandising at Walmart or sourcing or product, those and that value actually makes us a better company. And so it's not a charitable effort build these alternative routes and to ensure that we're hiring folks from all kinds of different backgrounds. It's actually business critical for our future and for our survival. And I know Salesforce has done a ton on this as well, but just that idea that it really shouldn't matter where you learned how to do a thing, as long as you know how to do that thing, we want you to come into our company and we want to make a path for you to get here.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, as you know, at Workday, we've got the opportunity on-ramps programs, which are really a way to give people access to opportunity that have tremendous skills and are going to bring great innovation to our company. And we have had an incredible conversion rate to full-time employees through that program because immediately they add value and managers recognize that. And so I completely agree with you. I think that it's just changing ingrained practices that takes some time. And I know, Maria, your organization is working really hard with employers everywhere to ensure that equitable access to opportunity. So I want to shift gears a little bit here. Really very along the same lines. As history has proven, we are not going to achieve economic equality without racial equity. How are your organizations addressing racial equity in your work? And Lisa, why don't I start with you, since you mentioned that is a cornerstone of what JVS is working on now.
Yep, absolutely. Thank you. So, during the last Great Recession, we really focused on addressing inequality. And as a result of that, we expanded our program significantly. We started working with across 5 sectors. We increased the number of employers we've worked with to about 360. And as a result of that, we saw that we were not achieving the same level of outcomes for all of our clients across the board. And so it became very important for us, even as we were doing strategic planning nearly a year ago by now, to really center our impact goals in racial equity so that we were making sure that all of our clients have access to our tech training programs, that all of our clients have access to the same level of wage. And that is really where the initiative around a longer success horizon, around a focus not just on placement, but advancement, helping people build careers, helping people build social capital so that they can access family sustaining wages. And so setting KPIs around racial equity is really sort of step one. But step two is also, I think, something that has become even more challenging post-COVID, is really figuring out now, how do we ensure that people have access to paid work experience in a way that's become much more challenging than it was 4 to 6 months ago. And so that will continue to be really an active area of work and anchoring around priorities for diversity hiring.
Great, thank you. Ebony, I know you already mentioned that you have brought together your diversity and equity team with your talent acquisition team. Can you talk a little bit more about how you guys are addressing racial equity in your work?
Sure. And Carrie, we've always been a company, like all of yours, that have been led by our core values. And I think equality has been one of them. And right now we really have to really double down on that effort. So most recently, we decided to formalize a committee to put our ideas and values into action through a racial equality and justice task force. And really the idea for that framework came from Melody Hobson, who's the president and CEO of Ariel Investments. And we hosted her for a conversation on racial injustice during an episode of Leading Through Change, which is an online series that we started as a result of the pandemic. And as a starting point, she suggested that all companies look to make change across 3 Ps, and they were people, purchasing, and philanthropy. And then we added in a 4th P, which is policy. And so this framework has allowed us to design a proactive strategy for addressing systemic racism that's balanced by really both urgent and immediate action, but also bold long-term planning. So that's something that we are really excited about. We released a statement externally, not because we think we have all the answers, but I think it's really helpful when we see what everyone is doing to give each other ideas, to collaborate where we can, and to really show people that now is the time to take action and inspire them to do it as well.
That's great. Thank you. I'm also just so enamored by the fact that you guys have published your goals publicly on your website. It really leads the way for others and makes it, basically you're setting the new standard, which is really inspiring. What about you, Maria, at JFF? How are you guys incorporating racial equity into your day-to-day work?
Sure, yeah, a lot of similar themes to what others have said. We're really taking, what we're calling like a mirrors and windows approach. So we're definitely looking inward and looking outward. I think in terms of the inward piece, this was a journey that, we started probably in earnest, maybe about 2 years ago, in forming an internal committee on diversity, equity, and inclusion, completely revamping our people and culture team to bring in new talent and perspective and approach to that internal work, relooking at all of our internal policies really from top to bottom, including doing a better job of walking the talk. We weren't always practicing what we were preaching. So for example, we've removed all the degree requirements from our positions so that we are doing what we're encouraging other employers to do, taking a better look at how we take equitable approaches to bringing in interns, for example. So really just doing a lot of introspective work, which has been, I think it's, we're on a journey. We're not completely there yet. But similarly, we have also established very clear DEI goals. So myself with my board, and then every employee at JFF has specific DEI goals as part of their annual performance appraisal. And then externally, I think we've recognized that while this has been core to our mission, we're really pushing ourselves to see, how can we do better? So for example, with the support of Walmart and Salesforce and other funders, we do a tremendous amount of work in the apprenticeship and work-based learning space. But how can we really bring a stronger racial equity lens to that work, for example? So just doing that type of analysis across our projects and with all of our partners, and just looking forward to really building on this moment to really step into the space and kind of the urgency of this issue even more.
Thank you. Gayatri, what about you guys over at Walmart and walmart.org?
Yeah, no, Carrie, I appreciate the question. I think for us, and it's similar to the comments that Ebony made, I think it starts with this idea of what are you measuring and what are the outcomes that you're seeking? And when we talk about racial equity being at the center of our work and being a priority for our work, what we mean is that race would not be a predictor of outcome. So in our philanthropy, when I think about our investments in workforce programs, our investments in credentialing programs, if race is in part an indicator of the outcomes that you're going to see as a result of the programs that you're investing in, how can we continue to support our organizations in shifting that, right? Because you don't want it to be an indicator of outcome. But the same thing holds true in our internal assessment, right? If someone's race is a predictor of their capacity to advance within the company, we have to begin to address those challenges. And so I think similar to how Maria described, there's an internal strategy that does start at the individual level, and there's an external strategy in terms of how we show up as a company and how we talk about these issues. I'm incredibly proud of our CEO's leadership on this issue in the last month. He chairs the Business Roundtable, which I think puts him in a unique position to speak not just for our company, but to really challenge and to put corporate America to get a little more comfortable, even just with the term structural racism. And what does it mean to live in a country where that is reality? And what does it mean to address that reality in a meaningful way? So I honestly think it starts with that individual education. It starts with language. It starts with history. One of the tools we've used at Walmart is that all of our leaders, and I had a chance to do this a few months ago, maybe late last year, have gone through a program called the Racial Equity Institute. And if folks aren't familiar with that, it's critical to all of our understanding of our nation's history. And one of the principles that they teach, in addition to just the sort of social construct of race and the history around race, is this idea of fish and groundwater. And another way to say that is sort of the system versus the individual. And so I think a lot of the work that we're taking on is recognizing where we may need a short-term emergent approach that is really that Band-Aid. It's fixing a problem for an individual versus where we can really get after shifting a system to actually make race no longer a predictor or an indicator of the outcomes. So Walmart had announced in early June, our CEO had announced the creation of a Center for Racial Equity, which is both an external philanthropic commitment to invest $100 million over the next 5 years in issues around education, health, criminal justice, and finance, but also a commitment to take those same 4 pillars and look within our company and see where and how we can move the needle against those systemic issues, explicitly articulating that if you don't move the needle on the systems issues, it doesn't, it sort of, you can do all the near-term fixing, but it won't actually shift outcomes. So I think trying to get to a more systems-based approach has been one of the ways we've addressed the issue.
Yeah, and it takes a really big organization like Walmart to put some muscle behind that if we're going to do some systems change. So
that's right.
So just to wrap things up, everybody listening is presumably interested in, closing that opportunity gap for people that are seeking either employment or a career shift. So to all of you, what can anyone that wants to be a part of the movement to help those who are experiencing barriers to employment or career progression do to help? And I'm just going to start by shameless plug. We do have a lot of materials available to volunteers, individual volunteers or corporate volunteers that want to get involved. If you visit workforceweek.org, we've got toolkits, communications guides, we've got everything you need to throw a mock interview event virtually at your company or as an individual. So I would just start by that plug of saying, check out workforceweek.org, start there. But to throw it out to all of you, how can people get involved? And I'll start, Lisa, with you.
Great. There's such a range of ways people can get involved. As individual volunteers, connecting your company for corporate volunteer events, making donations is so significant. But also really driving to the systems level, how can we think about changing hiring practices, and how can we think about really opening up access? And this is going to be my plug and my push, and that is, it's so critical that people have access to paid work experiences. This increases their social capital, it builds their resume, their skill set. The value of having that corporate brand on your resume just cannot be overestimated. And so I would really encourage everyone listening to think about ways that you might think differently about creating access to those opportunities. I know this is a hard time with hiring freezes and slowdowns, but that's going to be key to making the change we need to see.
Maria, anything you would add?
Definitely agree with Lisa. I would add 2 things. One, for corporations, I'd encourage you to get involved in the Recover Stronger campaign. So check out JFF's website for information on that. And I just think for every individual, reach out and advocate to your elected officials. I mean, I know Gayatri, in her kind of day job, outside of her day job, does a lot around advocating for mothers, and I find that extremely inspiring as a mother of 2 girls. And so I think, just use your voice. That New York Times article that ran recently, can you be, have a job and be a mother both during, COVID, really hit me pretty deeply, right? So make your voice heard no matter where you're coming from. Let your elected officials know what's the situation, how they can help. So I think it's just it's a moment for voices to be lifted up across America.
Oh, Gayatri.
I'll jump in. I'll jump in. Maria, I think what you just said is it's so true and it's so important. And how I always frame it, thinking about systems are made up of people. So, while we advocate to change a system, let's not ever forget that systems change when people change them. And so I think sometimes we're quick to sort of like, well, the system. I'm like, but the system is us.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
There's not one individual who doesn't have power that can be differentially. And so I think of it as, how are you going to share the power that you have, right? If you are in a position at a company where you are able to influence hiring, how can you shift that hiring process or that hiring system to be more equitable? But I loved Lisa's point about social capital, right? And probably actually anyone watching this on LinkedIn has more social capital than someone else in your life, right? And so how can you share with someone else the social capital that you have, the ability to open a door, to make an introduction, to just facilitate opportunity for somebody else in your life, or to offer that to others in any way, shape, or form within sort of the digital platforms that are available to us. So I would say, similar to Maria, like don't cede control to the system, like recognize your role in that system and really own the impact that each one of us can have through how we show up in the world.
Great. Ebony?
Plus one to everything that everyone just said. I'm going to give a plug for Workforce Week and Recover Stronger. And I think I'll just add, kind of following along with Gayatri just said, I think we have to look at the various pieces of the spectrum or the funnel. Like there's diversity and then there's inclusion, right? So there's things that you can do to get people in, but then you have to figure out what happens to them when they're in your companies. There is listening, and then there's action. We have to be doing more listening, more education, more talking about it, but then we can't just stop there. We have to see it through to action. So I would just suggest figuring out what you can do with your own resources individually and collectively, because we need both. And then just talking about it. And it's going to look differently for every company, but it's a good practice, I think, to start with what you have and then build from there.
I love that. That's great. Wonderful way to end this. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your viewpoints with me and our audience today. I really, really appreciate your time and your friendship. And thank you. Join us again for our next episode of Workday Chats. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie.